Adam Collins had $4 billion, and not one person in his life he could trust with the truth about how alone he felt. On the night this story begins, he stood in the kitchen of a $12 million home he had never once called cozy, holding a glass of wine he didn't want, listening to laughter coming from a dinner party he had paid for. He set the glass down, walked upstairs, packed a single duffel bag, and by morning, the richest man in the room was gone. What he did next would put him face to face with a woman who had nothing to give him but kindness, a woman hiding a secret of her own, one that would eventually threaten to destroy the only real thing he had ever found. This is the story of what happens when a man tries to disappear from his own life and discovers that the truth always finds its way back, no matter how far you run. Before we go further, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or your state in the comments below. We genuinely love seeing how far these stories travel. And if this is your first time here, welcome. We'd be grateful if you hit subscribe so you never miss the next one. Adam Collins was 38 years old, and by every outward measure, he had already won at life. He ran a logistics and technology company his father had started with 2 trucks and a phone line, and he had turned it into an empire worth billions. He had a mansion outside Charlotte, North Carolina, a private jet on standby at all times, a security detail that followed him even to the grocery store, and a name that opened doors before he ever knocked. But none of that had ever answered the one question that kept him up most nights. If he lost it all tomorrow, if the money vanished and the company collapsed and the jet was repossessed, who would still pick up the phone when he called? He didn't know the answer, and that terrified him more than any business decision he had ever made. It hadn't always felt this heavy. When Adam was younger, his father used to tell him that money was a tool, not a personality, and that the moment people start loving the tool instead of the man holding it, you're in trouble. Adam used to laugh that off as one of his father's old sayings. He stopped laughing the year his father passed away from a heart attack at his desk, 3 days after signing off on the company's biggest merger. After that, people around Adam changed. Old friend called more often. Distant cousins reappeared. Women he barely knew began sending messages that always somehow drifted toward investment opportunities or gifts. Adam wasn't naive. He understood why, but understanding it didn't make the loneliness easier to carry. The breaking point came at a dinner Adam hosted for close business partners, the kind of event with a private chef and wine older than most of the guests. Someone at the table joked, only half joking, that Adam didn't need love because he could simply buy whatever he wanted. The table laughed. Adam smiled along, the way he always did, but something in him went quiet and cold. Later that night, alone in his study, he pulled out an old photo album his mother had kept before she passed away years earlier. Page after page, he noticed the same pattern. Nearly every person who had once stood beside him in a photograph had eventually asked him for money, and not long after, disappeared from his life entirely. That was the night Adam made a decision most people in his position would never even consider. He would disappear. Not permanently, not recklessly, but long enough to find out if it was possible for someone to care about him without knowing a single thing about his bank account. He told only one person, his longtime assistant Grant, a man who had worked for the Collins family for over a decade and had earned every ounce of Adam's trust. Grant didn't like the plan. He told Adam plainly that he was playing with something dangerous, that the world outside the gates of his estate wasn't a controlled experiment. It was real, and real things could hurt him. Adam only replied that he needed to know if anyone out there could see him without seeing his money first. Over the following days, Adam quietly stripped his life down to almost nothing. He gave up his phone, his credit cards, his watch, his tailored clothing. He asked Grant to hold everything and to check on him from a distance without ever interfering. He picked up a worn jacket and a pair of boots from a secondhand store under a name nobody would recognize, Daniel Hart. He chose a modest, working-class part of the city, far from anywhere his face might be known, and within 2 days, Adam Collins, the billionaire, had effectively vanished, replaced by a quiet, guarded man who told anyone who asked that he simply hadn't had much luck lately. Question 1 for you to sit with as this story unfolds. Do you think it's possible for a person to truly know if someone loves them for who they are and not for what they have? Keep that question in mind, because it's about to be tested in a way Adam never expected. The woman who would change everything walked into Adam's life on an ordinary Tuesday evening, outside a grocery store where he had been sitting against the brick wall for hours, cold enough that his hands had gone numb. Her name was Grace Whitman, 29 years old, a woman most people in the neighborhood knew simply as reliable, the kind of person who showed up when she said she would and never made a promise she didn't intend to keep. She was carrying 2 heavy grocery bags when she noticed him, and unlike the dozens of people who had walked past him that day without a glance, she stopped. She didn't ask if he needed money. She simply reached into one of her bags, pulled out a sandwich she had bought for her own dinner, and held it out to him. Adam hesitated before taking it. He told her, almost out of habit, that he didn't need charity. Grace's response stayed with him longer than almost anything anyone had said to him in years. She told him she wasn't offering charity, she was offering food, and that there was a difference. There was no performance in the way she said it, no expectation of thanks, no phone camera capturing the moment for social media. She simply sat down on the curb beside him for a few minutes, told him her name, and asked for his. He gave her the only name he had left, Daniel. In the weeks that followed, Adam, as Daniel, learned more about Grace than most people ever learn about someone in years of friendship. She worked 2 jobs, mornings at a diner and evenings cleaning offices downtown, and every dollar she earned seemed to disappear into keeping her small household afloat. She lived with her younger brother, 17 years old and still in high school, and her mother, whose health had been declining for the better part of a year. Adam began to understand that Grace wasn't simply kind to him because she had extra to spare. She was kind to him while she herself had almost nothing left over, and that distinction mattered more than he could have explained. He watched her, quietly, the way someone watches a person they're beginning to care about without fully admitting it yet. He saw her hand over nearly her entire week's tips to cover part of her mother's prescription. He saw her tell her brother to keep the last $20 in her wallet for his school trip, then walk home instead of paying for the bus. He saw her fix an old space heater with nothing but a screwdriver and patience rather than spend money she didn't have on new one. None of it was performed for anyone's benefit. Grace had no idea anyone was paying attention at all, and that was exactly what made it real. Adam began sleeping at a small community shelter where Grace volunteered 2 nights a week, helping serve meals and organize donated clothing. It was there, one cold evening, that she told him something he never forgot. She said everyone deserves somewhere safe to sleep, no exceptions, no conditions. She wasn't trying to impress him. She meant it. Standing there, watching her fold blankets for strangers she would probably never see again, Adam realized something had shifted in him. He had stopped thinking about his experiment. He had started thinking only about her. But even as Adam allowed himself to hope, something didn't sit right. One evening, Grace's phone rang while they were sitting outside the shelter. She stepped a few feet away to answer it, but Adam still caught a fragment of what she said. Her voice had dropped low and tight. "I already told you I don't have the money." When she came back, her smile returned too quickly, too carefully. Adam asked who had called. She told him it was nobody important. He didn't believe her, but he didn't push. He didn't have the right to demand her secrets while he was still keeping his own. Question 2 now sits beside question 1. If question 1 was whether Adam could find someone who loved him without knowing he was wealthy, question 2 is this. What exactly was Grace hiding, and why did it frighten her enough to lie about it? Before we continue, if you're still with us, let us know in the comments. Type "I'm still here," and tell us honestly, do you think Grace's secret is going to be something forgivable or something that changes everything? A few nights later, Adam saw Grace meeting a man near the edge of the neighborhood, somewhere she clearly didn't want to be seen. The man's name, Adam would later learn, was Brian Mercer, someone connected to a painful chapter of Grace's past that she had never spoken about. From a distance, Adam watched Brian hand her an envelope. Grace's face, usually so composed, looked pale and afraid. He heard only pieces of their conversation. Brian told her she couldn't keep hiding this forever. Grace told him to stay away from Daniel. Brian asked her a question that landed heavier than anything else that night. Does he even know who you really are? For the first time since this experiment began, Adam wasn't only testing Grace anymore. He had started quietly trying to understand her, the same way she had once, without realizing it, started to understand him. He didn't confront her. Instead, he watched, waited, and let the pieces come together slowly, the way real trust is built, not through demands, but through time. It was Grace, however, who uncovered the truth first, and by accident. While helping Adam gather his few belongings one afternoon, she found something he had carelessly left behind. A watch, old but unmistakably expensive, the kind of item that didn't belong to a man with nothing. She didn't say anything at first. That night, alone in her room, she searched the brand online out of simple curiosity, and within minutes, a photograph appeared on her screen that made her stomach drop. Adam Collins, CEO, standing in a tailored suit outside a downtown office tower. The same face, the same eyes. Daniel. She didn't confront him immediately. Instead, she did something far more painful. She followed him one morning, quietly, staying far enough back that he never noticed her. She watched him walk into a glass tower downtown, watched the security guard at the entrance greet him by name, Mr. Collins, watched every trace of the man she thought she knew disappear into someone she had never actually met at all. Grace stood frozen on the sidewalk, understanding all at once that the homeless man she had been feeding, comforting, and slowly falling for was one of the wealthiest men in the country. It wasn't excitement she felt. It was heartbreak, because in an instant, every kind moment between them now felt like it needed to be re-examined. Was any of it real, or had she simply been part of some kind of test she never agreed to take? When Adam finally realized Grace knew the truth, there was no easy way to soften what came next. They met at the small shelter where they had first grown close, and Grace didn't raise her voice, which somehow made it worse. She asked him plainly how long he had planned to keep lying to her. Adam told her the truth, that he needed to know if she could love him without knowing what he had. Grace's response cut through him more than any accusation could have. She told him that he didn't have the right to decide, on his own, whether her feelings for him were real or not. That decision, she said, was never his to make. Adam tried to explain everything, his wealth, the isolation it had created, the years of watching people vanish the moment money entered the conversation, the fear that had driven him to lie to the one person who had ever made him feel like more than a bank account. Grace listened, and when he finished, she said something that stayed with him long after she walked away. She told him that he had spent this entire time trying to find someone who could love him without knowing he was rich, but in doing that, he had never once given her the chance to love the real him, the honest him, from the very beginning. He realized, standing there, that she was right, and there was nothing he could say that would undo the lie. Question 3 now stands fully in front of us. Now that the truth is out, now that trust has been broken on both sides, can this relationship possibly survive? Grace walked away that night, and she didn't look back. Adam returned to his mansion, the same home he had once found unbearably empty, and somehow, it felt even emptier now. He had everything he had walked away from weeks earlier, and none of it mattered without the one person who had made him feel like Daniel instead of Mr. Collins. Across the city, Grace sat quietly at her mother's kitchen table, staring at nothing in particular, her chest tight with a grief she didn't fully understand. She didn't call him. Not that night, not the next. Both of them, in their own way, had wanted the same thing from each other. Trust. And both of them, in trying to protect themselves, had lied to get it. That was the quiet tragedy sitting between them. Two people who might have loved each other honestly from the start, if fear hadn't gotten there first. In the days that followed, more of Grace's story came into focus. Brian Mercer wasn't a lover, and he wasn't a threat in the way Adam had first assumed. He was connected to a debt tied to Grace's late father, a man who had lost nearly everything years earlier after being taken advantage of by a wealthy businessman who never faced any consequences for it. That experience had shaped the way Grace viewed wealthy men for the rest of her life. She had spent years quietly protecting her family from people trying to collect on obligations that were never truly hers to carry. And she had never told Adam, because some part of her had always feared that wealthy men eventually showed their true colors. The bitter irony was not lost on her. The one man she had finally allowed herself to trust turned out to be exactly the kind of man she had spent her whole life guarding against, at least on the surface. Adam had a choice to make once he learned the full truth. He could use his fortune to erase Grace's family's debt overnight, to solve the problem the way he solved every problem in his life, with a signature and a wire transfer. But he understood, finally, that doing so would prove nothing. It would only confirm every fear Grace had ever carried about men like him. So instead, Adam offered her something far harder to give and far more meaningful to receive. He offered her the truth, without conditions. He told her plainly that he didn't want to buy her forgiveness, and he didn't want to fix what he had broken with money. He only wanted the chance to earn her trust honestly, the slow way, the real way. That decision marked the true turning point in who Adam was becoming. He was no longer trying to prove that Grace loved him. He was trying to become a man worthy of that love in the first place. Brian Mercer's role in all of this came to light not long after. He had known about Adam's identity for weeks, and rather than warn Grace directly, he had used that knowledge to manipulate the situation, hoping to create enough suspicion between them that Grace would turn to him instead, in hopes of settling her family's old debt through him. When the full scheme became clear, Adam had every resource available to destroy Brian financially, to bury him in legal consequences that would have taken years to recover from. He chose not to. Instead, he handled it quietly and lawfully, making sure Grace's family's obligations were resolved fairly through the proper channels, without a single dollar of manipulation involved. It wasn't revenge. It was justice, and the difference mattered to Adam more than it ever had before. Weeks later, Adam asked Grace to meet him one more time at the same spot outside the grocery store where they had first spoken. He came alone. No car waiting nearby. No security trailing behind him. Nothing but a man standing in the cold, hoping she would show up. She did. Adam told her that he had started this whole experiment because he wanted to know if someone could love him without his money ever entering the equation. But somewhere along the way, he had learned something he never expected. Love was never really about finding someone who didn't care about what he had. It was about finding someone who cared about him even when money wasn't part of the conversation at all. Grace didn't forgive him instantly, and the story doesn't pretend that healing works that fast because in real life, it never does. But she reached out and took his hand and told him that she wasn't ready to trust the billionaire standing in front of her. Adam quietly asked her who, then, she should trust instead. Grace smiled through tears that had been building for weeks and told him simply, the man sitting beside her. In the months that followed, their lives slowly wove together in ways neither of them could have predicted at the start of all this. Adam began spending real, unscheduled time with people again, without an agenda, without a test running quietly underneath every interaction. Grace's mother and younger brother slowly became part of his world too, not because he was buying his way into their lives, but because he showed up, consistently, the same way Grace once had for him. Adam used part of his fortune to start a foundation supporting people experiencing homelessness in the city. And Grace, who understood that world far better than any consultant he could have hired, became one of its earliest and most trusted voices. He kept one thing from those weeks as Daniel, the same worn jacket he had worn the night Grace first offered him half a sandwich, and he never let it go. Adam Collins became homeless because he wanted to discover what people would see once his money disappeared. What he found instead was something far harder to face. You can hide your wealth. You can hide your name. You can even hide your past for a while. But eventually, the truth always finds the person you love, and sometimes the same person who breaks your heart is the one who ends up teaching you what love actually means. If you were in Grace's position, discovering that the man you had grown to care about had been lying to you from the very beginning, would you have forgiven him the way she did, or would that lie have been impossible to move past? And if you were Adam, carrying that kind of loneliness for years, do you think you would have made the same choice he did? Tell us honestly in the comments what you would have done. And if this story touched you tonight, take a moment to like the video and share it with someone who still believes that real love is worth more than any amount of money. Subscribe to The Unsaid Story for more emotional, true-to-life stories filled with secrets, quiet betrayals, unexpected turns, and endings you won't forget.